am 34 years old. I was sitting in the second row of a Missouri County courtroom. The air smelled of industrial floor wax and damp wool. The wooden benches creaked as people shifted their weight. I watched my mother place her right hand on a leather-bound Bible. She wore a modest floral blouse, presenting herself as a fragile, heartbroken matriarch. The bailiff asked if she swore to tell the truth. Her voice rang out clear and steady in the quiet room. I do. She looked at the judge. She lifted her chin. She swore under oath that I was a vindictive, unstable liar. She told the court I had fabricated financial crimes to ruin her family. She was attempting to send me to jail to protect my older brother. Derek sat at the defense table, wearing a tailored Navy suit. I recognized the brand. He bought it using a credit card opened in my name. My father sat one row ahead of me. He turned his head, locking eyes with me. His posture was rigid. His gaze held a silent warning. Be quiet. Take the hit. Save your brother. This was the currency of our family. I was expected to pay for Derek's mistakes, even if the price was my own freedom. But what my mother did not know, as she smiled down at me from the witness stand, was that I possessed her iPad. Welcome back to Revenge Order. This is the channel where everyday people find the courage to stand up for what is theirs, not with anger, but with principle and proof. If you have ever been cut out, lied to, or betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, this story is for you. Drop a comment telling me your age and where you are listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Here is how a demand for blind family loyalty turned into a criminal syndicate, and how I dismantled it with a single piece of forgotten technology. Let me take you back 6 months. I work as a healthcare supply chain auditor in St. Louis, Missouri. My daily routine involves tracking millions of dollars in hospital inventory. I trace missing purchase orders. I hold vendors accountable for phantom invoices. My professional life is built on predictability. Numbers balance, or they do not. When they do not, someone is lying. My favorite tool for this job is a heavy, brass-barreled red pen. I use it to draw hard lines through discrepancies. It is a comforting instrument. It represents the exact opposite of my family dynamic. In my family, lines are always blurred, and accountability is treated as an insult. I learned early to protect my assets. When I was in college, Derek borrowed my debit card without permission and overdrew my checking account by $600. Our parents forced me to cover the fees. They said calling the bank would give Derek a record and ruin his future. That incident taught me a permanent lesson. I installed a premium credit monitoring service on all my accounts. It was a digital fence around my life. On a Tuesday evening in early October, I was using that red pen to check off a list of household chores. I was clearing out my guest bedroom. I tossed outgrown clothes and obsolete electronics into a cardboard donation box. Among the clutter was a dead, outdated family iPad with a cracked screen. I dropped it into the box without a second thought. I checked another item off my list. 10 minutes later, my phone chimed. It was an automated email alert from the credit monitoring service. I opened the notification. An SBA business loan had just defaulted. The balance was $45,000. The borrower listed was Lucinda Richardson. I did not scream. I did not call my parents. Panic is a luxury for people who lack data. Instead, I walked to my home office. I booted up my laptop. I paid $39 to pull a comprehensive tri-bureau credit report. I clicked my red pen. I started reading at the top of page 1. By page 3, the ink was running low. There was not one defaulted SBA loan. There were 14 overlapping accounts. Credit cards, equipment leases, personal lines of credit. The bottom line sat in stark black font. $152,340. My breathing slowed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I pressed the tip of the pen into the paper until it tore the page. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Only one person possessed both my Social Security number and the financial desperation required to pull this off. My older brother, Derek. At 36, Derek was a serial entrepreneur. His ventures routinely evaporated, leaving a trail of unpaid vendors. Our parents, Thomas and Patricia, quietly smoothed over every failure. They paid his rent. They funded his startups. They called him misunderstood. I picked up my phone and sent Derek a screenshot of the SBA loan. I added a single question mark. His reply arrived 3 minutes later. It was a long block of text. He blamed a phantom. He claimed a former business partner must have used my name as a corporate reference by mistake. He promised to call the bank in the morning to sort out the clerical error. He ended the message by telling me to calm down and not overreact. It was a lazy lie. Corporate references do not require an applicant's social security number. They do not require a photocopy of a driver's license. They do not generate $150,000 in revolving credit. He was testing my intelligence. He assumed I would accept his excuse because our parents had trained him to believe his excuses were always sufficient. I ignored his text. I bypassed Derek and dug into the details of the largest loan application. I needed the digital footprint of this supposed business partner. I called the lender's fraud department. The wait time was 40 minutes. I sat at my desk and watched the second hand on my wall clock sweep in endless circles. My hands felt numb. The silence in my condo was heavy. When a representative finally answered, I kept my voice level. I verified my identity using my recent pay stubs and tax returns. I asked them to read the secondary contact email attached to the application. If Derek's partner opened the account, their information would be in the recovery file. The representative typed on her keyboard. The sound echoed through the phone line. She read the email address aloud. It did not belong to a rogue partner. It was an old AOL address. I recognized it before the representative finished spelling the domain. It belonged to my mother. The drive from my downtown St. Louis condo to my parents' house in Chesterfield took 34 minutes. I drove in total silence. I kept the radio off. The leather wrap of the steering wheel felt sticky against my palms. I rehearsed the sequence of facts in my mind like preparing for a hostile vendor audit. I had the printed credit report sitting on the passenger seat. The pages were thick with my red ink. Chesterfield is a wealthy suburb. The neighborhood projects an image of effortless success. The lawns are manicured to exact lengths. The mailboxes are matching brushed bronze. My parents lived in a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and pristine white shutters. It was a beautiful facade built over decades of financial dysfunction. I pulled into the driveway and parked behind Derek's leased Range Rover. I did not knock. I pushed the front door open and stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of roasted beef and rosemary. It was Sunday evening, the traditional family dinner hour. I walked down the hallway toward the living room, passing through the open kitchen. The countertops were spotless white quartz. Sitting squarely in the center of the kitchen island was a stack of glossy pamphlets. I paused. My training as an auditor forces me to notice items out of place. My father had complained just last month about rising property taxes squeezing his retirement budget. Yet the pamphlets featured high-gloss photographs of a 2025 luxury Class A motorhome. The dealer sticker printed on the front page displayed a staggering number, $120,000. I ran my thumb over the smooth paper. A heavy, uncomfortable realization settled in the back of my mind. I left the brochures on the counter and continued into the living room. Derek was lounging on the beige leather sectional. He had his feet propped up on the glass coffee table, wearing a designer hoodie and pristine white sneakers. A professional football game played on the large flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace. He held a cold beer in his right hand. He looked perfectly relaxed. He looked like a man who did not have $150,000 of stolen debt hanging over his head. I stepped in front of the television. I dropped the stack of red-inked credit reports directly onto his lap. The thick pile of papers hit his legs with a heavy thud. Derek let out a long, exaggerated sigh. He did not flinch. He did not look surprised. He picked up the television remote and paused the game, adopting the expression of a weary parent dealing with a tantruming child. "I told you I was handling this," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You always make a crisis out of nothing." I pointed at the top page. Forging my signature on an SBA business loan is not nothing, Derek. Replacing my contact information with Mom's email address is not a clerical error. You stole my identity. Derek tossed the papers onto the coffee table. He leaned back into the sofa cushions. He deployed his usual defense mechanism. He denied the intent, attacked my reaction, and reversed the roles to make himself the victim. You are being hysterical, he said. I already explained this in my text. My former business partner, Kevin, filed the back office paperwork for the new logistics venture. We were discussing bringing you on as a consultant because you know supply chain management. Kevin must have used your details as a corporate reference, and the bank got confused. A corporate reference does not sign a promissory note, I replied, keeping my tone dead level. A corporate reference does not receive 14 different credit cards. And a phantom business partner named Kevin does not use Mom's old AOL address for the password recovery file. Before Derek could spin another lie, the swinging door from the dining room pushed open. Patricia, my mother, walked in carrying a ceramic gravy boat. She was wearing her Sunday pearl earrings. Thomas, my father, followed closely behind her, holding a carved wooden serving tray. My mother stopped in the center of the rug. She looked at the scattered credit reports on the glass table. She looked at my rigid posture. She did not drop the gravy boat. She did not gasp in horror. She simply tightened her grip on the ceramic handle and glared at me. You are ruining Sunday dinner, she said. Her voice was sharp and brittle. We have neighbors with open windows, Lucinda. Lower your voice this instant. Your son committed felony forgery, I said, looking directly into my mother's eyes. He took out $150,000 in my name. I waited for the shock. I waited for my father to demand an explanation from Derek. I waited for my mother to demand the truth. The shock never came. Instead, my father stepped forward and crossed his arms over his chest. He positioned himself between me and Derek, acting as a physical shield for his 36-year-old son. Your brother made a mistake with some paperwork, my father said, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. His business hit a rough patch. He needed bridge capital to keep his employees paid. We are a family, Lucinda. He is your brother. We will handle this internally. The floor beneath my feet felt unstable. My auditor instincts processed the data points unfolding in front of me. If someone learns their child has stolen 6 figures, their pupils dilate, their breathing quickens, they ask questions. My parents asked 0 questions. They already possessed the answers. They knew about the debt. They knew about the forged applications. My mother's email address was the digital key proving her complicity. The betrayal shifted from a greedy sibling to an orchestrated family cover-up. Felony fraud is not a family dispute, I said. The temperature in my voice dropped to freezing. You do not handle federal banking crimes internally over a pot roast. Patricia set the gravy boat down on the end table with a sharp clatter. She wiped her hands on her apron, treating me like dirt she needed to wash away. You make a 6-figure salary, Lucinda. You have no dependents. Derek has a wife and 2 children to feed. You can afford a temporary ding to your credit score. We will arrange a payment plan. You are not going to destroy his life over mere money. I looked at the 3 of them, Derek smirking on the sofa, Thomas standing guard, Patricia demanding my financial sacrifice as a filial duty. You have 48 hours, I said. Derek scoffed. Or what? Or I walk into the Chesterfield Police Precinct and hand a detective this exact folder. I turned around and walked out of the living room. I did not stay for dinner. I walked past the kitchen island, past the glossy brochures for the luxury RV, and walked out the front door. The night air was cold. I climbed into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. My hands were shaking, but my mind was remarkably clear. I merged onto Interstate 64, heading back toward the city. The highway was mostly empty. The rhythmic hum of the tires against the asphalt provided a steady cadence to my racing thoughts. I needed to freeze my credit bureaus. I needed to place a fraud alert on my Social Security number. I mapped out the architecture of their betrayal. The spreadsheet grew into a devastating timeline. I could see the exact moment my father authorized the union diversion. I could track the minute my mother swiped the debit card for her spa treatment. I was constructing a digital armory, gathering the ammunition I would need to dismantle their carefully crafted public image. The quiet intensity of the hunt fueled me. For years, I had allowed my parents to dictate the narrative. They controlled the story, painting me as the rugged, unrefined outcast, while presenting themselves as sophisticated pillars of society. They viewed my career as a tedious burden, unless it could be exploited for sympathy or financial gain. This ledger proved they were nothing more than parasitic opportunists. The woman paused. I heard the clicking of a computer mouse through the speakers. I have a Lucinda Richardson listed for a final signature on a property loan disbursement. We are closing the second mortgage on your downtown condo, the $60,000 equity line. The appraiser cleared the property last Tuesday, so we are ready to fund. My foot slammed against the brake pedal. The car jerked hard, the tires letting out a brief, sharp screech as I veered onto the highway shoulder. I threw the gear shift into park. Dust plumed around my headlights in the dark. I never applied for a second mortgage. The hazard lights of my sedan blinked in rhythm with my racing pulse. The amber glow illuminated the dusty shoulder of the highway. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Sarah, from Gateway Title and Escrow, waited on the other end of the line. I closed my eyes and focused on drawing oxygen into my lungs. "Cancel the appointment," I said. My voice sounded hollow inside the quiet car. "Freeze the disbursement. Do not wire a single dollar to whatever account you have on file." Sarah hesitated. I could hear the rustle of papers in the background. "Ms. Richardson, the underwriting is finished. We just need the final wet signature. There are cancellation penalties at this stage." "I do not care about penalties," I told her. "The person who applied for that equity line is committing bank fraud. I am the sole owner of that property, and I did not authorize a second mortgage. Flag the file and lock it down." I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. It landed on top of the red-inked credit reports. A second mortgage. A $60,000 loan secured against the walls I slept inside. Derek was not merely ruining my credit score. He was actively attempting to steal the roof over my head. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen island and watched the city traffic far below my window. As soon as the sun rose, I showered, dressed in my sharpest charcoal blazer, and drove straight to the Gateway Title office in the financial district. I arrived 10 minutes before they opened. Sarah sat behind a frosted glass desk. She looked nervous. She handed me a thick manila folder containing the mortgage application. I flipped through the printed pages. There it was, my name, my social security number, a forged digital signature. The routing number for the cash-out disbursement matched the same local bank Derek used for his failed logistics company. I turned to the property valuation section. A cold chill crept up my spine. To secure an equity line of this size, federal banking regulations require an in-person physical appraisal of the real estate. A licensed inspector must walk the premises, measure the rooms, and photograph the interior condition. I stared at the color photographs printed on the appraisal report. There was my living room. There was my kitchen island. There was my bedroom, showing my unmade bed and the book resting on my nightstand. The photos were date-stamped. Last Tuesday. I looked up at Sarah. "How did your appraiser get inside my condominium on the 12th floor of a secure building?" Sarah pulled up the digital logs on her monitor. The appraiser noted that the homeowner met him in the lobby and escorted him upstairs, she said, reading the screen. "A woman matching your description provided access at 2 in the afternoon." My hands gripped the edge of the frosted glass desk. Last Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon, I was sitting in a windowless conference room in Chicago, attending a corporate logistics summit. I had the flight records and hotel receipts to prove it. I was nearly 300 miles away. There was only one other person on Earth who possessed a physical key to my unit. I gave it to my mother 3 years ago. It was a silver key with a bright blue plastic ring. I asked her to keep it for emergencies, in case a pipe burst while I was traveling for work. The physical reality of the situation crashed into me. Patricia did not merely cover for Derek after the fact. She took my emergency key. She drove to my building. She smiled at a stranger in the lobby, claimed to be me, and unlocked my front door. She walked a bank appraiser through my private sanctuary, allowing him to photograph my personal belongings, all to help my brother steal the equity I spent 6 years of grueling corporate labor to build. This revelation unlocked a very old, very bitter memory. I was 12 years old. The Missouri summer was thick with humidity. I spent 2 months watching the neighbors' toddler twins earning sweaty, crumpled bills that I smoothed out and stored in a floral tin box beneath my bed. $200. It was a fortune to a child. I planned to buy a new bicycle. One afternoon, I found the tin box empty. The lid was resting on the carpet. Derek, who was 14, sat in the living room playing a brand new gaming console. I ran to my mother. I cried. I demanded justice. Patricia did not comfort me. She did not confront her son. She handed me a damp dish towel and told me to dry my face. "Do not ruin his week over a few dollars, Lucinda," she had said, returning her attention to a magazine. "You are a smart girl. You can always earn more." The baseline was established in that exact moment. My labor existed to subsidize his desires. My stability was a natural resource my family felt entitled to harvest. They did not view me as a daughter or a sister. They viewed me as a treasury. I left the title company and drove to my corporate office. The building was a tower of steel and reflective glass. My heels clicked against the polished marble lobby. I swiped my security badge and took the elevator to the audit department. I sat at my desk and pulled my heavy red pen from its leather holder. I unscrewed the brass cap. I did not get a chance to use it. My supervisor, a stern woman named Helen, approached my cubicle. She did not offer her usual morning greeting. She tapped her knuckles against my glass partition. She asked me to leave my belongings and follow her down the hall. We walked past the break room and took a left turn toward the Human Resources Department. My stomach tightened. We entered a spacious office with a sweeping view of the St. Louis Arch. The HR director, a man named Marcus, sat behind a wide oak table. He motioned for me to sit. Helen closed the door behind us, sealing out the ambient noise of the busy floor. Marcus slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood. It was an automated compliance flag. I audit healthcare supply chains. I have clearance to approve multi-million-dollar vendor contracts. Because of the vast amounts of money we manage, the hospital network runs continuous financial integrity checks on all senior auditors. It is a safeguard designed to detect signs of embezzlement or bribery. The system had caught the defaulted SBA loan. It caught the 14 maxed-out credit lines. It caught the pending foreclosure notices sent to my stolen identity. $150,000 in sudden, unexplained delinquent debt makes an auditor a high-risk security liability. To a corporate compliance algorithm, I look like an employee desperate enough to take a bribe. Lucinda, Marcus said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "We received an automated alert from the Credentialing Bureau this morning. Your financial background check triggered a critical failure. Can you explain these liabilities?" I sat rigid in the leather chair. My job was my sanctuary. It provided my health insurance, my condo, and my entire identity outside of the Richardson family. If I lost my career, I lost everything. I could no longer protect my parents without destroying myself. The shield of family loyalty cracked and shattered on the oak table. I looked Marcus in the eye. "I am the victim of identity theft," I said. Helen crossed her arms. Marcus frowned, pulling a secondary form from his drawer. He laid it flat on the desk. "Company policy dictates an immediate suspension of clearance for any critical financial flag," Marcus explained. "I have to lock your corporate network access. You must surrender your laptop and your procurement credentials today." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I cannot do my job without network access," I said. "I know," Marcus replied. "We are giving you 72 hours. We need a filed police report and a formal legal affidavit proving this debt is fraudulent. If you cannot provide legal documentation clearing your name by Friday at 5 o'clock, we will be forced to terminate your employment." I stared at the suspension notice. My brother forged my signature. My mother unlocked my home. And now I had 3 days to declare a legal war against my own blood or I would lose the only life I had ever built for myself. The suspension stripped me of my professional armor. I walked out of the Human Resources Department carrying an empty cardboard box. Marcus watched me leave from behind his large oak table. Helen stood by the door. Her expression remained unreadable. I returned to my cubicle to pack my personal belongings. I gathered the brass-barreled red pen. I packed a framed photograph of a hiking trip in the Colorado mountains. I wrapped a ceramic coffee mug in paper towels. I left my corporate laptop in the exact center of the desk. My security badge sat beside the keyboard. My network access was already severed. I had 72 hours to save my livelihood. I rode the elevator down to the lobby. The descent felt like a tangible weight pressing against my chest. I drove straight to my downtown condo. I brewed a pot of dark roast coffee. I poured a cup, but did not add sugar. I needed the bitter taste to keep my senses sharp. I opened my personal computer. I navigated to the Federal Trade Commission website. I began filling out an official identity theft affidavit. Checking the digital boxes felt like crossing a psychological point of no return. Submitting this form meant transforming a domestic issue into a federal banking crime. The questionnaire asked for the name of the suspected perpetrator. I typed Derek Richardson into the blank field. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I hit submit. The government portal generated a formal document stamped with a tracking barcode. I printed 3 copies. The laser printer whirred in the quiet room, spitting out the warm pages. My next target was the phantom business partner. Derek blamed a man named Kevin for filing the fraudulent applications. If Kevin truly existed, he would have left a digital trail. During my earlier phone calls with the various fraud departments, I had requested the original metadata from the online submissions. Federal lenders are required by law to log the originating Internet protocol addresses for every approved credit line. The encrypted data files arrived in my email inbox shortly after noon. I opened the spreadsheets. I stared at the raw numbers. A strange, quiet grief washed over me. I was not mourning the brother I was investigating. I lost Derek a long time ago, swallowed by his own entitlement and shielded by our parents. I was mourning the illusion of my entire upbringing. I realized I never possessed a true family. I grew up surrounded by human parasites. They attached themselves to my stability. They drained my resources while demanding my endless gratitude. The sorrow lasted exactly 3 minutes. Then my auditor training took over. I wiped my eyes and began tracing the geographical origins of the numerical strings. I used an open-source geolocation tool to map the originating networks. I copied the first string of numbers from the spreadsheet and pasted it into the search bar. The system processed the request. The geographic coordinates loaded onto a digital map. A red pin dropped onto the screen. The pin did not land on a commercial office building. It did not point to a shared workspace used by a rogue partner named Kevin. The digital footprint traced directly to a residential internet service provider. The billing address matched a 2-story colonial house in Chesterfield. The loans were submitted using Patricia and Thomas's home router. My parents did not just turn a blind eye after the fact. They provided the secure network Derek used to commit felony forgery. I moved to the second batch of IP numbers. These applications corresponded to the 2 largest retail credit cards. I pasted the digits into the search tool. The system refreshed. A new red pin dropped onto the map. My breath caught in my throat. The coordinates pinpointed a location in downtown St. Louis. It was my own apartment building. The internet service provider listed was the exact company I paid every month. The router hardware address matched the white plastic box sitting on my television stand. I cross-referenced the application dates with my personal calendar. November 24th, Thanksgiving week. 6 months ago, Derek asked to crash on my sofa for 3 nights. He claimed the heating system in his rental unit was broken. I bought groceries. I cooked him a holiday dinner. I gave him my wireless network password so he could stream movies on his tablet. While I slept in the guest room, Derek sat on my couch. He connected to my private network. He submitted fraudulent credit applications. He did not just steal my identity. He engineered the digital evidence to frame me. If a bank investigator pulled these logs without context, the geography pointed directly to the victim. It was not a crime of sudden financial desperation. It was a cold, calculated setup designed to make me look guilty. I picked up my cell phone. I dialed my father. He answered on the second ring. His tone was casual, as if the explosive confrontation from the previous night had never occurred. "Hello, Lucinda," he said. "Are you calling to apologize to your mother?" I ignored his condescending question. "Whose idea was it to use my wireless router during Thanksgiving?" I asked. "Did you tell Derek to submit the applications from my couch so the bank fraud department would think I opened the accounts myself?" The line went dead silent. The casual demeanor vanished. "I traced the internet logs, Dad," I continued. My voice was stripped of all emotion. "Half the loans originated from your living room in Chesterfield. The other half originated from my condo while Derek was eating the turkey I cooked for him. Your son framed me." My father erupted. His voice shattered the quiet of my apartment. He shouted through the receiver, his words slurring together in defense of his golden child. "You are a cold-blooded corporate drone," he yelled. "You care more about your pristine credit score than your own flesh and blood. Derek made a mistake. He is trying to fix it. You are trying to send him to prison over a simple misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding does not use my home network to avoid federal detection," I replied. "You have until tomorrow morning to clear this up. If the balances are not at zero, I am walking into the precinct with these logs." I ended the call. I did not wait for his response. I placed the phone face down on the granite counter. I spent the next 2 hours compiling a master binder. I organized the credit reports, the title company appraisal records, the Federal Trade Commission affidavit, and the printed geolocation maps. I used clear plastic sleeves for the most damning evidence. I snapped the heavy metal rings shut. The trap was fully prepared. I was ready to hand the police a flawless, airtight case. Then a sharp knock echoed through my condo. I walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. A man in a beige windbreaker stood in the hallway. He held a thick manila envelope. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. "Lucinda Richardson?" the man asked. "Yes." He thrust the envelope toward my chest. "You have been served." He turned and walked toward the elevator without another word. I stood in the doorway, staring at the brown paper. I tore the seal and pulled out the legal documents. The header displayed the official seal of the St. Louis County Civil Court. Derek was not running. He was not scrambling to find the money to pay off the debt. He had hired an attorney. My brother was striking first, using the legal system as a weapon to paralyze me before I could reach the detectives. The thick manila envelope felt heavy in my hands. I stood in my hallway and read the first page of the legal filing. It was a formal notice of a pending civil action. Derek was suing me for defamation and tortious interference with his business operations. The lawsuit claimed my aggressive inquiries into his corporate references were causing his Phantom Logistics company to lose vital vendor contracts. The document demanded a cease and desist order, blocking me from contacting any financial institutions associated with his name. It was a brilliant, malicious delay tactic designed to tie up my resources in civil court while the statute of limitations on the criminal fraud ticked down. I dropped the lawsuit onto my kitchen island. A civil summons does not halt a criminal investigation. I grabbed my 3-inch binder. The metal rings clicked as I double-checked the plastic sleeves holding the IP logs, the forged mortgage appraisal, and the Federal Trade Commission affidavit. I drove directly to the St. Louis County Police Headquarters. The Financial Crimes Unit occupied a windowless room on the 3rd floor. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The air smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. A desk sergeant directed me to Detective Miller. He was a veteran investigator with graying hair and a weary expression that suggested he spent his days listening to endless, convoluted stories of missing money. I sat in a hard plastic chair across from his metal desk. I did not waste his time with emotional family history. I opened my binder. I walked him through the timeline. I showed him the credit reports covered in red ink. I pointed to the geographical map displaying the origin IP addresses tracing back to my parents' house in Chesterfield. I handed him the title company documents proving my mother impersonated me to allow an appraiser into my condominium. Detective Miller leaned forward. His weary expression evaporated. He flipped through the organized tabs. He traced his finger along the digital timestamps. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with genuine surprise. "Miss Richardson," he said, his voice quiet, "I handle financial fraud every day. Victims usually bring me a shoebox full of crumpled receipts and expect me to build the timeline. You just handed me a trial-ready prosecution package." He closed the binder and placed his hands flat on the cover. "We are opening a felony investigation immediately," he confirmed. "I will request an arrest warrant for Derek Richardson by the end of the week." A heavy knot loosened in my chest. For the first time in 3 days, I exhaled a full breath. The legal machinery was finally turning in my favor. I thanked him, walked out of the precinct, and drove back to my apartment. I felt a brief, fragile sense of victory. The victory lasted less than 48 hours. On Thursday morning, my phone vibrated on my nightstand. The caller ID displayed the police department's main switchboard. I answered quickly, expecting Detective Miller to inform me Derek was in custody. "Lucinda," the detective said. His tone was vastly different from our meeting in his office. The supportive professional warmth was gone. It was replaced by a sharp, suspicious edge. "We need to discuss a critical piece of evidence you failed to disclose." My stomach dropped. "I disclosed everything," I replied. "What piece of evidence?" "My officers visited your brother's residence in Clayton this morning to execute a preliminary search warrant on his home office. Derek was extremely cooperative. He voluntarily handed my team a legal document. It is a general, durable power of attorney. It explicitly grants Derek Richardson full legal authority to open financial accounts, secure loans, and manage real estate transactions on your behalf." The room spun. I pressed my palm against the cool drywall of my bedroom to steady myself. I never signed a power of attorney. I never gave Derek control over my finances. "The document is notarized, Ms. Richardson," the detective continued. "The signature matches your driver's license perfectly. It was executed 14 months ago. Why did you sit in my office and accuse your brother of felony identity theft when you legally authorized him to act as your financial proxy?" Derek had laid a trap. The civil lawsuit was merely a distraction. This forged document was his true defense. He planned to use the legal system's reliance on notarized paper to legitimize his theft. If the police believed the power of attorney was genuine, the entire case shifted from criminal fraud to a civil contract dispute. The police would drop the investigation. My HR department would fire me. "Send me a scanned copy of that document immediately," I demanded. My voice was tight with suppressed panic. Detective Miller hesitated, but agreed. A PDF attachment arrived in my email inbox 2 minutes later. I opened the file on my laptop. I stared at the screen. The document looked incredibly official. The legal jargon was flawless. My signature sat at the bottom of the page, scrawled in black ink. It was perfect. The loop of the L and the sharp angle of the R matched my handwriting exactly. I am an auditor. I hunt discrepancies. I zoomed in on the signature, magnifying the digital pixels. A natural human signature contains microscopic variations in pressure and ink flow. A digital copy, pasted onto a new document, often displays faint, pixelated edges, known as compression artifacts. I stared at the magnified loops. The edges were slightly blurred. The signature was a high-resolution composite. Derek lifted the signature from an older document. I searched my memory, mentally cataloging every physical paper I had ever given my brother. The answer surfaced. 15 years ago, I gave Derek an 8x10 portrait from my college graduation. I signed the back of the photograph with a thick felt-tip pen. The loops and angles matched the forged document perfectly. I shifted my attention to the bottom right corner of the page. The Missouri Notary Public seal was stamped over the text. The name inside the circular stamp read, Jessica Vance. The commission expiration date was valid. I opened a new browser tab. I searched the Missouri Secretary of State database for commissioned notaries. Jessica Vance was a registered active notary in St. Louis County. I pulled up her public social media profiles. I scrolled through a timeline of vacation photos and restaurant check-ins. I stopped scrolling. A photograph posted 3 weeks ago showed a young woman with blonde hair standing next to a familiar man. It was Derek. His arm was wrapped around her waist. They were smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Weekend getaway with my favorite guy." Jessica Vance was not a neutral legal witness. She was Derek's current girlfriend. I dug deeper. I located her employer through a professional networking site. Jessica Vance did not work at a law firm or a bank. She was employed as a shift manager at a storefront payday loan center located in a strip mall off a busy interstate. Derek used his romantic relationship to secure a fraudulent state seal. I picked up the phone and dialed Detective Miller. "The power of attorney is a digital forgery," I said, not waiting for him to speak. He lifted my signature from a 15-year-old photograph, and the notary who stamped that document is not impartial. Her name is Jessica Vance. She is Derek's girlfriend. She works at a payday loan store in South County. The line was silent for several seconds. When Detective Miller finally spoke, the suspicious edge was gone. The weary investigator tone returned, sharpened by genuine anger. "A registered notary falsifying a state seal is a severe offense," he said. "We will subpoena the security camera footage from her payday loan storefront. If the cameras prove you were not physically present when that seal was applied, the document is void." The trap was broken. The detective informed me the charges against Derek would be upgraded: forgery, tampering with public records, identity theft. The net was closing rapidly around my brother and his accomplice. I hung up the phone. I exhaled, allowing myself a brief moment of relief. The digital evidence was irrefutable. Derek could not lie his way out of a falsified state seal. 10 minutes later, my cell phone began to vibrate violently across the kitchen island. A barrage of incoming text messages flooded the screen. The notifications chimed in rapid succession. They were not from the police. They were from my extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins I had not spoken to in years. I opened the first message from my Aunt Carol. "How could you do this to your own mother?" the text read. "You need serious psychiatric help." The parents had gone nuclear. The phone continued to buzz against the granite countertop. The rapid vibration sent a low hum through the kitchen. I picked up the device. The screen was a chaotic waterfall of incoming notifications. My extended family was mobilizing. I opened the text application. Aunt Carol accused me of needing psychiatric help. Uncle David sent a long paragraph demanding I drop the fabricated charges against my brother. My cousin Sarah asked how I could sleep at night, knowing I was destroying my own blood. I did not reply to any of them. Instead, I opened my social media application. I navigated to my mother's profile page. Patricia had posted a lengthy essay just 1 hour prior. It already had 40 comments and dozens of sympathetic reactions. She uploaded a photograph of our family from 10 years ago. We were all smiling. It was the perfect visual bait for a tragedy. I read the paragraph she constructed. Patricia spun a masterful narrative. She presented herself as a heartbroken, long-suffering matriarch. She claimed her highly successful corporate daughter had suffered a severe, stress-induced mental breakdown. She wrote that the pressures of healthcare auditing pushed me over the edge. According to her essay, I maxed out my own credit cards in a manic spending spree. Then, unable to face the consequences, I fabricated a delusional story to frame my innocent brother. She concluded the post by asking for prayers, stating she loved both her children and hoped I would find the psychiatric care I desperately needed. The strategy was brilliant in its cruelty. By painting me as a fragile, overworked woman experiencing a psychotic break, she immunized Derek against my allegations. She weaponized my demanding career to make her lie sound plausible. To the outside world, a corporate burnout scenario seemed far more likely than a brother stealing 6 figures and a mother orchestrating the cover-up. The comments section was a chorus of misplaced pity. Church friends offered to bring casseroles. Neighbors promised to keep our family in their thoughts. Every sympathetic comment was a brick in the fortress my mother was building to lock me out of reality. My thumbs hovered over the digital keyboard. The instinct to defend my reputation flared hot in my chest. I wanted to post the red-inked credit reports. I wanted to upload the forged signature. I wanted to expose the truth to every aunt, uncle, and neighbor who offered Patricia their blind sympathy. I lowered my hands. I remembered my training. Engaging with a smear campaign only generates more noise. In toxic family structures, relatives who attack the victim on behalf of the abuser are known as flying monkeys. They feed on emotional reactions. They thrive on the drama of a public argument. If I commented, I validated their twisted game. I would look exactly like the unstable, erratic woman Patricia described. I chose silence. I closed the application. I activated the Do Not Disturb feature on my phone. The screen went dark. The buzzing stopped. My condominium returned to a state of quiet focus. Let Patricia hoard the digital sympathy. Facebook likes do not hold up in a court of law. Data does. 2 days passed in this isolated silence. I stayed inside my apartment. I could not go to work. The Human Resources Department had suspended my corporate access pending the resolution of the criminal inquiry. The walls of my condominium felt closer together. My professional identity, the core of my self-worth, was held hostage. I spent the hours organizing my physical files. I drank dark roast coffee. I reviewed the bank statements over and over, searching for hidden patterns. I waited for the legal system to process the evidence I provided. The waiting was a different kind of torture. It was a passive helplessness that contradicted every instinct I possessed as an auditor. On Friday morning, the silence broke. Detective Miller called my cell phone. His voice carried a distinct, sharp energy. It was the tone of an investigator who just uncovered the missing puzzle piece. "Ms. Richardson," he said, "I received the financial subpoenas back from the banking institutions. We finished tracing the routing numbers for the dispersed loan funds." I pulled a fresh legal pad across my desk. I uncapped my red pen. "Tell me where the money went," I said. The detective rattled off the figures. Derek utilized a strategy of rapid distribution to obscure the origin. $30,000 went to clear past due invoices for his bankrupt logistics firm. $20,000 paid off his leased Range Rover. Another sum covered his overdue residential rent. Smaller amounts were siphoned into various online sports betting platforms. But one specific transaction does not fit the pattern, Detective Miller continued. We traced a substantial wire transfer originating from the fraudulent SBA loan. It was moved through a shell account and then deposited into a local credit union. The amount was exactly $45,000. I wrote the number on my notepad. $45,000. Did the credit union account belong to Derek's girlfriend? I asked. No, the detective replied. The receiving account is a joint checking file. The registered account holders are Thomas and Patricia Richardson. My hand froze. The red tip of my pen rested against the paper, bleeding a small crimson circle into the yellow fibers. I stared at the name of my parents written in my own handwriting. The detective kept speaking, explaining the legal implications of receiving stolen funds across state lines. But his words faded into a low hum. A paradigm-shifting realization fractured my entire understanding of the conflict. I believed my parents shielded Derek out of a twisted, enabling sense of parental loyalty. I believed they were covering up his crimes to protect their golden child from a concrete prison cell. That was a comforting lie. It allowed me to maintain a sliver of respect for them as misguided protectors. The truth was far more sinister. They were not shielding him. They were partnering with him. They allowed him to ruin my credit because they benefited directly from the plunder. They received a substantial payout. They were financially complicit in the felony. They orchestrated the public smear campaign against me not to save Derek, but to save themselves from a criminal conspiracy charge. I ended the call with the detective. I sat in the stillness of my office. $45,000. Why that specific amount? The number felt deliberate. It was not a random cut of the profits. It was a targeted sum required for a specific purchase. My mind flashed back to Sunday evening. I pictured the pristine Chesterfield house, the smell of roasted beef, the white quartz countertops of the kitchen island, and sitting directly in the center, arranged like a trophy, was the stack of glossy pamphlets. The brochures featured a 2025 Class A luxury motorhome. The dealer sticker printed on the front page displayed a total price tag of $120,000. I opened my internet browser. I navigated to the Missouri Department of Revenue public portal. I accessed the Vehicle Registration Inquiry System. The database allows citizens to verify property tax and registration status using a basic name and county search. I typed Thomas Richardson into the query box. I selected St. Louis County. I hit enter. The loading icon spun in a small circle. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what I was going to find, yet a small, desperate part of my childhood soul hoped the screen would return empty. The screen loaded. A list of registered vehicles appeared. I scrolled past my father's sedan and my mother's crossover SUV. At the bottom of the list sat a brand new entry. It was filed 3 weeks ago, a 2025 luxury recreational vehicle. I clicked the hyperlink to view the public lien details. The financing records showed a total purchase price of $120,000. The bank financed $75,000. The cash down payment applied at the dealership was exactly $45,000. The final layer of the deception unraveled before my eyes. Derek did not just steal my identity to fund his failed business. He stole my credit to buy his parents a retirement toy. He purchased their silence. He bought their loyalty using my stolen future. My parents traded their daughter for a motorhome. The revelation of the $45,000 down payment crystallized my focus. The conflict was no longer a matter of emotional betrayal. It was a documented criminal syndicate. My family operated as a coordinated unit of financial predators. They stole the money, distributed the assets, and constructed a false narrative of my mental instability to protect their plunder. I printed the vehicle registration records. I placed the fresh documents into my master binder. I did not shed a single tear. Tears are a response to a perceived loss. I finally understood I had nothing left to lose. My first priority was securing my livelihood. The 72-hour deadline imposed by Human Resources expired that afternoon. I drove downtown to my corporate office. I bypassed the security desk and met Marcus, the HR director, in the glass-walled lobby. I handed him the official police report and the Federal Trade Commission affidavit. The documents clearly stated I was the victim of a coordinated identity theft ring involving a forged power of attorney. Marcus reviewed the stamped paperwork. His professional, guarded demeanor relaxed into genuine relief. He handed the papers back to me. "We will lift your suspension immediately, Lucinda," he said. "Your network access will be restored within the hour. The hospital network takes these matters seriously, but you provided irrefutable proof. I am sorry your family put you through this ordeal." I thanked him, clipped my security badge to my lapel, and took the elevator up to my floor. I sat at my desk. I logged into my computer. The familiar spreadsheet grids filled my screen. For a few hours, the predictable rhythm of balancing corporate accounts offered a brief respite from the chaos outside the building. I believed the worst of the storm had passed. I believed the police would arrest Derek, seize my parents' luxury motorhome, and clear the debt from my name. I was wrong. The storm was merely gathering strength. At 3 p.m, the glass doors of the audit department swung open. A man wearing a gray suit walked past the receptionist. He carried a thick folder. He did not look like a corporate vendor. He navigated the maze of cubicles until he reached my desk. My colleagues, typing quietly at their stations, stopped working. They watched the stranger. "Lucinda Richardson," the man asked. His voice carried across the quiet floor. I stood up. My face grew hot. "Yes," I answered. He handed me the folder. "You have been served," he announced loudly. He turned and walked out. The silence in the audit department was deafening. 30 professionals stared at me. I sat down quickly, my hands trembling as I opened the folder. The header displayed the seal of the local circuit court. It was not another civil lawsuit for defamation. It was far more damaging. Derek had filed a petition for an ex parte civil harassment restraining order. I read the allegations listed in the sworn affidavit. My brother claimed I was stalking him. He wrote that I drove past his house late at night, called his phone incessantly, and sent threatening letters to his wife. He leaned heavily on the narrative my mother established on social media. The legal documents stated I was suffering from a severe psychotic break and presented an immediate physical danger to his young children. The strategy was devastatingly effective. Derek was terrified. Detective Miller had frozen his bank accounts. The police were building a solid forgery case against his girlfriend, Jessica Vance, for falsifying the state notary seal. The federal indictment was looming. Derek needed a weapon to stop the investigation, so he weaponized the domestic violence statutes designed to protect real victims. By filing a civil restraining order, Derek legally forced a temporary no-contact mandate. The order did not just prohibit me from calling him. It prohibited me from communicating with any third party regarding his personal affairs. That included Detective Miller. If I called the Financial Crimes Unit to provide new evidence about the motorhome, Derek's lawyer could argue I violated the harassment order by aggressively pursuing an investigation against him. It was a masterful delay tactic. It stalled the felony investigation precisely when the district attorney was preparing to file formal charges. Worse, the restraining order presented an existential threat to my career. If a judge granted a permanent protective order against me, it would trigger a mandatory entry on my permanent background check. Corporate auditors require immaculate criminal and civil records. A documented history of stalking and violent threats would result in my immediate termination. My employer could tolerate a victim of financial fraud. They could not employ a legally certified stalker. The civil hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend preparing my defense. I did not hire an attorney. A lawyer would try to negotiate. A lawyer would try to mediate a family dispute. I did not want mediation. I wanted annihilation. I compiled cellular tower ping records from my mobile provider. I requested my corporate office keycard swipe logs. I gathered every piece of data proving my physical location during the dates Derek claimed I was harassing his family. Tuesday morning arrived with heavy gray skies. I walked into the county courthouse. The metal detectors beeped. The polished marble floors echoed with the footsteps of lawyers and anxious defendants. I located the assigned courtroom on the second floor. I waited in the wide hallway outside the heavy oak doors. Derek emerged from the elevator. He wore his tailored navy suit. He looked confident. His attorney walked beside him carrying a sleek leather briefcase. The lawyer spotted me standing alone near the water fountain. He whispered something to my brother, detached himself, and walked briskly toward me. Ms. Richardson, the lawyer said, stopping 3 feet away. His tone was smooth, polished, and entirely hollow. I am representing your brother today. I did not reply. I stared at his expensive silk tie. This entire situation has gotten out of hand, the lawyer continued, adopting a sympathetic voice. Derek is under immense stress. He wants to protect his children, but he also does not want to see his sister lose her corporate career over a family misunderstanding. We know a permanent restraining order will ruin your professional background check. What is your point? I asked. My voice was flat. My client is willing to offer a hallway settlement right now, the lawyer said. We will withdraw the petition for the restraining order. We will walk away today, and your background check remains spotless. In exchange, you sign a simple civil debt acknowledgement stating you verbally authorize the loans as an investment in his company, and you call the police to drop the criminal charges. It was legal extortion. Derek held my career hostage and demanded I purchase my professional survival by adopting his crimes. If I signed the acknowledgement, I became permanently liable for $150,000. The felony investigation would collapse. Derek would walk away clean. My parents would keep their luxury motorhome. I would spend the next decade paying off a debt I never incurred. I looked at the lawyer. I looked at Derek standing across the hallway watching me with a smug, expectant expression. He believed I would cave. He believed my fear of public embarrassment and professional ruin would outweigh my desire for justice. I reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out my heavy, brass-barreled red pen. I clicked the top button. The sharp metal tip extended with a satisfying snap. I do not negotiate with thieves, I told the lawyer, and I do not sign false documents. I turned my back on him. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. I walked into the courtroom. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me. The courtroom felt cold. The air conditioning hummed a steady, vibrating note above the wooden pews. The judge, an imposing woman with silver hair pulled back into a severe knot, sat behind an elevated mahogany bench. She reviewed the docket, her expression neutral and detached. This was just another Tuesday morning on the civil calendar. Derek and his attorney entered a moment later. They took their seats at the petitioner table. I sat alone at the respondent table. I did not hire counsel. I placed my thick, red-penned binder on the scarred wood in front of me. I unclasped the metal rings. I arranged my documents. The judge called the case. Richardson versus Richardson. Petition for an ex parte civil harassment restraining order. Derek's lawyer stood up. He launched into an impassioned opening statement. He painted a vivid picture of a fractured family terrorized by an unstable sibling. He claimed my aggressive pursuit of an imaginary financial crime was merely a symptom of a deeper psychological breakdown. He called his client to the witness stand. Derek performed his role flawlessly. He wore a crisp white shirt beneath his navy suit. He slumped his shoulders, adopting the posture of an exhausted, frightened father. He testified that I drove past his house late at night, parking my car down the street to watch his windows. He claimed I sent threatening, incoherent letters to his wife. He described a specific incident on a rainy Thursday night 3 weeks prior, where I supposedly pounded on his front door, demanding money, while his children slept upstairs. His voice cracked. He wiped a single tear from his cheek. He looked at the judge with wide, pleading eyes. Your Honor, Derek said, his voice trembling perfectly. I love my sister. We tried to get her psychiatric help, but she is obsessed with destroying my business. She is dangerous. I just want my family to be safe. The judge nodded sympathetically. The narrative of the manic corporate burnout was highly persuasive. It fit the social stereotype, the successful unmarried woman cracking under pressure and lashing out at her grounded, family-oriented brother. The judge turned her gaze to me. Ms. Richardson, you may cross-examine the witness. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not match his emotional performance. I picked up my red pen and a stack of printed spreadsheets. I walked toward the witness stand. Mr. Richardson, I began, keeping my tone entirely clinical. You testified under oath that I pounded on your front door on Thursday, October 12th at 11:15 at night. Is that correct? Derek shifted in his wooden chair. He glanced at his lawyer. Yes, he answered. That is correct. I saw you through the peephole. I handed the judge a stapled packet of paper. Your Honor, I am submitting Exhibit A. These are the certified access logs from my corporate security office. I audit multi-million-dollar supply chains. My physical movements within my office building are strictly monitored. These logs show I swiped into the secure server room on Thursday, October 12th at 8:30 in the evening. I did not swipe out of that building until 2 in the morning. I was completing an emergency quarterly reconciliation. I was physically locked inside a high-security corporate tower 30 miles away from my brother's front door. Derek swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed against his collar. I turned to the next page in my folder. You also testified that I parked outside your house on Monday, October 16th at approximately 10 o'clock at night. Is that accurate? Yes, Derek muttered. His voice lost its theatrical tremor. I handed the judge a second packet. Exhibit B, Your Honor. These are subpoenaed cellular tower records from my mobile provider. They map the exact location of my phone based on data pings. On Monday, October 16th at 10 o'clock at night, my phone was pinging a tower in downtown Chicago. I was attending an industry summit. I have included my hotel receipt and my airline boarding pass. I continued down the list. I systematically dismantled every fabricated stalking date using irrefutable timestamp data. I proved I was at a dentist appointment during one alleged incident. I proved I was sitting in a windowless room with a police detective during another. I did not cry. I did not plead. I let the cold, hard numbers expose his perjury. The judge flipped through the exhibits. Her sympathetic expression hardened into a severe scowl. She looked over the rim of her reading glasses at my brother. Derek was sweating. A visible sheen of moisture collected on his forehead. He gripped the wooden railing of the witness stand, his knuckles white. The contrast was stark. The supposed victim was terrified of the facts, while the alleged stalker stood perfectly still, armed only with a red pen and a stack of cellular data. The judge dropped the paperwork onto her bench. She did not bother asking Derek's lawyer for closing arguments. "Mr. Richardson," the judge snapped, her voice echoing sharply across the quiet room. "You have attempted to use this court as a weapon to retaliate against a witness in a separate criminal investigation. You fabricated dates. You fabricated incidents. You lied under oath." The judge struck her gavel. The sharp crack made Derek flinch. "This petition is dismissed with prejudice," the judge declared. "Furthermore, I am forwarding a transcript of today's proceedings to the district attorney's office. You are incredibly fortunate I am not holding you in direct criminal contempt for perjury today. Get out of my courtroom." Derek scrambled out of the witness box. He practically ran down the center aisle, his lawyer rushing to keep pace. I gathered my documents. I snapped the metal rings of my binder shut. I walked out into the hallway. The extortion attempt failed. The civil block was legally lifted. I walked out to my car and dialed Detective Miller. "The temporary restraining order is dismissed," I told him. "You can proceed." 3 days later, the legal machinery slammed into gear. The district attorney reviewed the forged power of attorney, the bank IP logs, the title company appraisal fraud, and the transcript of Derek's perjured testimony. The evidence was overwhelming. A grand jury convened. They returned an indictment in less than 2 hours. Derek was formally charged with 7 felony counts of identity theft, bank fraud, and tampering with public records. Arrest warrants were issued. His girlfriend, Jessica Vance, was indicted as a co-conspirator for falsifying the Missouri State Notary Seal. The criminal arraignment and bond hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. On Sunday evening, the night before the hearing, I sat in my quiet condominium. The adrenaline of the past few weeks drained from my system, leaving a hollow exhaustion. I walked into the guest room to finish packing the donation boxes I abandoned when the first credit alert pinged nearly a month ago. I sorted through old sweaters and discarded books. I reached into the bottom of a cardboard box. My fingers brushed against smooth, cold glass. I pulled out the dead, outdated family iPad with the cracked screen. I stared at the device. I remembered tossing it into the bin on that fateful Tuesday evening. I intended to wipe the hard drive and drop it at an electronics recycling center. I walked into the kitchen and found an old charging cable tangled in a drawer. I plugged the cable into the wall outlet. I inserted the connector into the iPad. I did not expect it to work. The battery had been dead for over a year. I just wanted to see if I could recover some old digital photographs of my late grandmother before destroying the memory chip. I pressed the power button. 5 minutes passed in silence. Then the screen flickered. A bright white Apple logo appeared against a black background. The outdated operating system slowly booted up. The home screen loaded, displaying a generic landscape wallpaper. The device automatically connected to my saved wireless network. The moment the internet connection registered, the silence in my condominium shattered. A sharp, high-pitched notification chime rang out, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. The chimes began overlapping, creating a relentless, frantic chorus of digital noise. The screen froze, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of data. A banner dropped down from the top edge of the glass. It displayed a text message preview. Then another banner dropped. Then 50 more. The old iPad was receiving a massive data push from the cloud server. It was downloading 3 years of unsynced text messages. The relentless chiming finally stopped. The cracked screen of the iPad settled into a static display. Hundreds of unread message badges hovered over the green messaging icon. I sat on a bar stool at my kitchen island and stared at the glowing rectangle. My mother is a woman of appearances. She meticulously curates her public image. She deletes anything she considers unsightly. When the financial investigation began, she likely went through her personal iPhone and erased every text thread linking her to Derek. She believed deleting a message from her pocket erased it from existence. She did not understand cloud architecture. She did not realize that a synchronized account pushes data to every registered device on the network. This old, forgotten iPad had been sitting in a cardboard box, disconnected from the internet, for over a year. The moment I plugged it into the wall and the Wi-Fi reconnected, the server recognized a registered device missing years of communication history. It dutifully downloaded every text, every photo, and every deleted conversation Patricia thought she had permanently destroyed. I tapped the green icon. The application opened. The screen populated with dozens of conversation threads. I scrolled past mundane messages about grocery lists and neighborhood gossip. I located the thread labeled with Derek's name. It was thick with thousands of lines of text, dating back over 36 months. I started reading from the bottom, working my way backward through the timeline. I expected to find evidence of my mother covering for my brother. I expected to see him begging her to hide his financial ruin. I expected the narrative I had already built in my mind. I was entirely wrong. The plot twist hit me like a physical blow. I stopped breathing. I read a cluster of text messages time-stamped 6 months ago. Derek did not initiate the identity theft. He did not steal the money and offer a cut to our parents to buy their silence. Patricia ordered the theft. The text messages outlined a brutal, calculated extortion scheme, orchestrated entirely by my mother. Derek owed Patricia $45,000 from a previous business venture she had quietly funded. Patricia wanted her money back. She wanted to buy the luxury motorhome. Derek was broke. So my mother instructed her son to cannibalize her daughter. I read the specific instructions Patricia typed into her phone. Use Lucinda's middle initial on the Chase application, she wrote. It bypasses the secondary security flag. A few lines down, another message appeared. Push the loan through by Friday. We need the cash-out disbursement so we can buy the RV by Tuesday. The messages revealed a staggering level of premeditation. Patricia did not just provide the Wi-Fi network. She provided the tactical blueprint. I scrolled through dates corresponding to the various loan applications. Whenever Derek encountered a security hurdle, Patricia supplied the answer. When a bank required a mother's maiden name, she texted it to him. When a lender asked for the name of my first childhood pet, Patricia supplied the answer. She handed him the keys to my identity, piece by piece. I found a text string discussing the second mortgage on my condominium. Derek expressed hesitation. He texted that faking a property appraisal was too risky. Patricia's response was chilling in its casual cruelty. I have her spare key, Patricia wrote. I will meet the appraiser in the lobby. She will be in Chicago all week. Just finalize the paperwork. My hands were steady. The emotional shock bypassed tears and crystallized into pure, icy focus. I continued scrolling. I searched for a single text expressing guilt. I looked for a moment of hesitation. I searched for evidence that my mother felt conflicted about destroying my financial future to fund her retirement toy. I found a message dated the morning the SBA loan was approved. Derek texted her saying he felt bad because the default would eventually ruin my credit score. Patricia's reply sat starkly against the white background. Lucinda makes too much money anyway, she typed. She owes us for raising her. She will recover. Get the money wired today. There it was, the ultimate justification. To Patricia, I was not a human being. I was an ungrateful investment. My success was an insult to her golden child, and my wealth was a resource she felt inherently entitled to seize. I owed them for the basic biological necessity of my upbringing. I did not scream. I did not throw the iPad against the wall. I acted like the auditor I was trained to be. I placed the iPad flat on the granite counter. I used my cell phone camera to photograph every screen. I captured the digital timestamps. I documented the phone numbers. I verified the iCloud account linked in the settings menu belonged to Patricia. After photographing the screens, I initiated a complete digital export, emailing the raw chat logs to 3 separate secure cloud servers. I printed the entire conversation thread on my laser printer. The printer hummed, spitting out 30 pages of undeniable, documented conspiracy. I pulled my brass-barreled red pen from my blazer pocket. I uncapped it. I sat at the kitchen island and methodically reviewed the printed logs. I drew thick red circles around every admission of guilt. I underlined the instructions to use my middle initial. I highlighted the discussion about the luxury motorhome. The pages bled with red ink, transforming a family chat log into a federal prosecution file. I felt an absolute, chilling clarity. The grief was gone. The confusion was gone. I possessed the architectural blueprint of their deception. My cell phone chimed. A new text message appeared on the lock screen. It was from my father. I opened the message. Thomas was not backing down. He believed the civil court defeat was a minor setback. He believed the family narrative would still overpower my data in a criminal setting. "We are testifying for Derek tomorrow morning at the arraignment," Thomas wrote. His tone was arrogant, brimming with the false confidence of a man who had never faced a consequence in his life. "We are telling the judge you authorized everything verbally. You gave Derek permission to use your credit, and now you are lying because you are jealous of his business. It is 2 against 1, Lucinda. Drop the charges before you embarrass yourself in front of a judge." My father believed perjury was a valid legal strategy. He believed 2 parents lying under oath would create enough reasonable doubt to get a felony indictment dismissed. He did not know about the synchronized cloud server. He did not know about the deleted messages. He did not know I possessed his wife's written confession. I stared at the threatening text message. I typed a simple 4-word reply. "See you in court." I hit send. I closed my phone. I packed the red inked text logs into a fresh plastic sleeve and snapped them into my 3-inch binder. I laid my clothes out for the morning. I slept a full 8 hours. The sun rose over St. Louis. I drove to the county courthouse. The true confrontation was finally here. The story catches up to the moment I described at the very beginning. I walked through the heavy wooden doors of the Missouri County Courthouse. The air inside the judicial chamber was distinctly different from the chaotic energy of the civil hallway. Criminal court carries a severe, undeniable weight. The stakes are no longer measured in damaged reputations or suspended corporate access. The stakes are measured in years of federal incarceration. I took my seat in the second row of the gallery, positioned directly behind the prosecution table. The wooden bench groaned slightly under my weight. The familiar scent of industrial floor wax and damp wool grounded me. It reminded me that this was a place of sterile procedures and documented facts, not a living room where emotional manipulation governed the rules of reality. Derek sat at the defense table. He wore a sharply tailored navy suit. His posture was rigid. He kept his eyes fixed on the heavy mahogany bench at the front of the room. He did not look back at me. His defense attorney, a different man from the civil hearing, sat beside him reviewing a stack of legal pads. Thomas and Patricia sat 1 row behind Derek, separated from me by a wide center aisle. They presented a united, formidable front. My father wore a gray blazer. My mother wore a modest floral blouse. They glared at me with undisguised hostility. My father leaned forward, his jaw tight, his expression daring me to back down. They believed their physical presence would intimidate me into silence. They believed the unified force of the family hierarchy could crush a single dissenting daughter. I did not break eye contact. I held my 3-inch binder in my lap. The metal rings felt cold against my palms. The prosecutor assigned to the case, an assistant district attorney named Harrison, approached the gallery railing. He was a sharp, meticulous lawyer who built his career dismantling financial fraud rings. He leaned over the wooden divider. "Ms. Richardson," Harrison whispered, Are you prepared for this morning? The defense intends to move for an immediate dismissal based on sworn affidavits from your parents. They are arguing the loans were part of an informal, verbal business agreement. I unclasped the binder. I pulled out the fresh plastic sleeve containing the 30 pages of exported iCloud chat logs. The pages were heavily annotated with my brass-barreled red pen. I am prepared, I told him. I handed him the plastic sleeve. I recovered these messages last night from an old synced tablet my mother forgot she owned. They outline the entire conspiracy. They detail the exact amounts, the forged signatures, and the specific instructions to use my middle initial to bypass security checks. Harrison pulled the thick stack of papers from the sleeve. He adjusted his glasses. He began reading the top page. I watched his eyes track across the highlighted text. I watched his eyebrows rise. He flipped to the second page, then the third. He read the message where Patricia explicitly ordered Derek to push the loan through so they could purchase the luxury motorhome by Tuesday. Harrison stopped reading. He looked up from the documents. He looked at my parents sitting across the aisle, projecting their image of outraged innocence. He looked back at me. A slow, sharp nod was his only response. He slid the papers into his own leather briefcase and took his seat at the prosecution table. The dramatic irony settled heavily over the courtroom. The trap was set, spring-loaded and waiting for a trigger. I knew the truth. The prosecutor knew the truth. My parents and my brother sat oblivious, polishing their lies, utterly unaware they were about to walk onto a minefield of their own design. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. The judge entered from chambers. She was a different magistrate from the civil hearing. Judge Abernathy was known for her strict adherence to evidentiary rules and her severe intolerance for courtroom theatrics. She took her seat, adjusted her microphone, and called the docket. State of Missouri versus Derek Richardson. 7 counts of felony identity theft, 2 counts of bank fraud, 1 count of tampering with public records. Derek stood up. His attorney stood beside him. The defense immediately launched into their primary strategy. They did not deny that Derek's name was attached to the funds. They did not deny that the money was spent. Instead, they attacked the core premise of the crime. They argued there was no theft because there was no victim. Your Honor, the defense attorney stated, his voice ringing clearly across the room. We intend to show that these charges stem from a deeply unfortunate family misunderstanding. My client and his sister entered into a verbal agreement to secure bridge financing for a joint business venture. When the business struggled, Ms. Richardson suffered a change of heart and attempted to retroactively classify this authorized family loan as identity theft. The defense attorney gestured toward the gallery. We have sworn affidavits from the parents of both the defendant and the accuser verifying that this verbal agreement existed. We are requesting the charges be dismissed, as this is clearly a civil contract dispute, not a criminal matter. Judge Abernathy frowned. She tapped a pen against her legal pad. A verbal authorization to utilize another person's social security number is highly irregular, Counselor. However, if the immediate family is prepared to testify under oath that the victim possessed prior knowledge and gave verbal consent, it creates a significant evidentiary hurdle for the state to prove criminal intent. The defense attorney smiled. We are prepared to offer that testimony right now, Your Honor. We call Patricia Richardson to the stand. My mother stood up. She smoothed the front of her floral blouse. She walked down the center aisle, her head held high. She exuded the quiet dignity of a mother forced to intervene in a tragic dispute between her children. She stepped into the witness box. The bailiff approached holding a leather-bound Bible. He asked her to raise her right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Patricia placed her hand on the book. Her voice was steady and resolute. I do. She sat down in the wooden chair. She adjusted the microphone. She looked past the defense table. She looked directly at me sitting in the second row. A slow, victorious smirk spread across her face. Her eyes conveyed a message of absolute superiority. She believed she had won. She believed her maternal authority would eclipse my corporate spreadsheets. She was ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime, confident that her words would set her golden son free and bury my reputation forever. At the prosecution table, Assistant District Attorney Harrison slowly clicked his pen. He did not look at Patricia. He kept his eyes on his leather briefcase, waiting for her to speak. The defense attorney stepped away from his table and approached the wooden podium facing the witness box. He adjusted his suit jacket and offered my mother a warm, encouraging smile. He treated her like a fragile artifact, a grieving parent caught in an unimaginable domestic tragedy. Mrs. Richardson, the lawyer, began his tone soft and inviting. "Can you explain your understanding of the financial arrangement between your two children?" Patricia leaned into the microphone. Her voice carried a practiced, melodic sorrow. Lucinda offered to help her brother, she testified. "My daughter holds a very demanding corporate job. She earns a substantial salary, but she lives a very solitary life. No husband, no children. She told me she wanted to invest in Derek's logistics company. She said she wanted to finally feel a part of something meaningful, to help build a legacy for our family." The lie was breathtaking in its precision. She did not just invent a financial narrative. She weaponized my independence, twisting my single status into a symptom of profound loneliness. She painted me as an empty woman trying to purchase a sense of belonging through my brother's business. The defense attorney nodded sympathetically. "So you were under the firm impression your daughter authorized these specific credit lines?" "I was present when they discussed it in my living room," Patricia stated. She looked directly at the judge. "She told Derek to use her information. She told him to do whatever it took to get the bridge financing secured." "Then why are we sitting in a criminal court today?" the lawyer asked. "Why did Miss Richardson file a police report alleging identity theft?" Patricia lowered her gaze. She reached into her handbag and produced a folded white tissue. She pressed the cloth to the corner of her eye. "The business hit a rough patch," she said, her voice catching perfectly on the final syllable. "Lucinda is an auditor. She is very particular about her credit score. When the monthly payments fell behind, she panicked. She became vindictive." Patricia sniffled, dabbing her other eye. "My daughter has always harbored a deep, unresolved jealousy toward her brother. Derek has a warm, loving home, a beautiful wife, 2 gorgeous children. Lucinda is isolated. When the money became an issue, she decided to frame my boy. She decided to send him to federal prison over a simple family squabble. It breaks a mother's heart to watch her children fight like this." The courtroom absorbed her performance in total silence. The judge softened her posture, leaning back in her heavy leather chair with an expression of weary understanding. A few people in the gallery murmured quiet sounds of sympathy. Derek lowered his head, burying his face in his hands to feign overwhelming shame. The defense attorney thanked her and returned to his seat looking immensely satisfied. He had successfully reframed a documented felony into a tragic, emotional dispute. I sat in the second row, my face an unreadable mask. I did not feel the sting of betrayal. The capacity to feel wounded by Patricia evaporated the moment I discovered the luxury motorhome. Instead, I observed her with the clinical detachment of an investigator watching a suspect secure their own fate. My eyes focused on my mother's right hand. It rested on the polished oak railing of the witness box. Her thumb was moving. Tap, tap, tap. It was a rhythmic, subconscious tell. She beat that exact cadence against a steering wheel 20 years ago when she convinced a patrol officer not to write her a speeding ticket. She tapped that same rhythm on a mahogany desk when she persuaded a high school principal not to expel Derek for stealing an exam answer key. The tapping was the physical manifestation of her deceptive confidence. It meant she believed her manipulation was working. Assistant District Attorney Harrison stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He did not carry a legal pad. He did not hold a binder. He walked to the center of the floor empty-handed, projecting an aura of relaxed curiosity. Mrs. Richardson, the prosecutor, began, his voice devoid of the defense attorney's theatrical warmth. "That was a deeply moving account of your family dynamics. Patricia offered a tight, modest nod. "Thank you. It is a very difficult situation." Harrison paced slowly in front of the jury box, though there was no jury present today. "Before we proceed into the details, I want to clarify a fundamental legal standard. You understand you are testifying under oath this morning. Yes. You comprehend the severe penalties associated with committing perjury in a court of law?" "I am telling the truth," Patricia replied. Her tone sharpened, displaying a hint of manufactured, righteous indignation. "Let us be remarkably precise," Harrison said, stopping his slow pace and turning to face her directly. "You are testifying unequivocally that you firmly believed your daughter Lucinda authorized every single one of these bank loans from the very beginning. You assert she possessed full prior knowledge." Patricia lifted her chin. She looked down at the prosecutor with supreme arrogance. "Yes, I am certain. She knew about everything." The trap clicked shut. The steel jaws of the legal record locked around her ankles. She committed to the lie, permanently abandoning any potential defense of ignorance or misunderstanding. Harrison turned his back on the witness box. He walked toward the prosecution table. He opened his leather briefcase. He reached inside and extracted the thick plastic sleeve I provided earlier that morning. Through the clear plastic, the front page of the printed chat logs was visible. Thick red circles drawn by my brass-barreled pen highlighted the damning text. The floorboards creaked as the prosecutor carried the documents back to the center of the room. He did not offer them to the defense. He did not hand them to the judge. He held the stack of papers at waist height. Mrs. Richardson Harrison said, his voice echoing cleanly in the quiet chamber. "Do you recognize the mobile phone number ending in 4492? I watched my mother's hand on the oak railing. The thumb stopped tapping. The sudden stillness was deafening. The rhythmic beat of her confidence vanished instantly. Her fingers curled inward, gripping the edge of the wood so tightly her knuckles turned pale. She stared at the prosecutor. Her eyes darted toward the papers in his hand. She looked past him, seeking an anchor at the defense table. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his fake shame replaced by genuine, rigid panic. Patricia swallowed, her throat constricted. "Yes," she whispered. The bold, melodic resonance was entirely gone from her voice. "That is my cell phone." Harrison offered a single, curt nod. He turned away from the witness stand and looked toward the court clerk sitting beside the elevated bench. "Please activate the courtroom projector," the prosecutor instructed. The mechanical hum of the projector motor filled the silent courtroom. A motorized white screen descended from the ceiling, covering the dark wood paneling behind the witness stand. The bulb ignited. A blinding square of light illuminated the front of the room. The court clerk adjusted her computer terminal. An image flashed onto the canvas. It was a high-definition scan of a text message conversation. The green and gray chat bubbles were blown up to towering proportions. My thick red ink circled the focal points of the digital dialogue. Prosecutor Harrison stood beside the projected image. He did not look at the screen. He kept his eyes locked on my mother. He held the physical printouts in his hand. "I am reading from an iCloud export retrieved directly from a synchronized device linked to your verified phone number," Harrison stated. His voice was a calm, steady instrument of destruction. "The date stamp is May 14th. The recipient is your son, Derek Richardson." Harrison looked down at the paper. "Use Lucinda's middle initial on the Chase application," he read aloud. "It bypasses the secondary security flag. Push the loan through by Friday. We need the cash-out disbursement so we can buy the RV by Tuesday." The color drained from Patricia's face. The flush of righteous maternal indignation vanished, replaced by an ashen, sickly gray. Her jaw went slack. The elegant, long-suffering mother persona shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She stared at the 50-foot projection of her own written confession. "Mrs. Richardson," the prosecutor asked, "did you type those words?" Patricia opened her mouth. No sound emerged. She swallowed hard, her throat working frantically. She looked at the defense attorney. The lawyer was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open, the color leaving his own face. He had built his entire defense strategy around a grieving mother. He just realized his star witness was the architect of a federal conspiracy. "That is not what it looks like," Patricia stammered. Her voice sounded thin and weak. "Someone must have gained access to my account. My phone was compromised. The internet is full of hackers." Harrison flipped to the next page. He signaled the clerk. The projection shifted to a new screenshot. "A compromised account does not answer personal security questions," Harrison noted. "On May 16th, your son encountered a verification hurdle for an equipment lease. He texted you asking for help. Your response was immediate. You provided the maternal maiden name of your own grandmother. You provided the street address of the house where you grew up. A hacker does not possess generational family trivia. You fed him the keys to your daughter's identity." Patricia gripped the wooden railing. Her knuckles turned stark white. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. "Those messages are out of context," she pleaded. "We were discussing a different business venture. It was a joke between a mother and her son. You are twisting my words to destroy a family." The defense attorney remained entirely silent. He did not object. He did not intervene. He was legally paralyzed. He could not defend a witness actively committing perjury on the stand without risking his own bar license. I watched the reaction of the men sitting at the defense tables. Thomas sat in the row ahead of me. He was reading the projected text messages. He read the explicit mention of the recreational vehicle. He saw the timeline corresponding perfectly to the $45,000 wire transfer. My father possessed a volatile temper, but he was not entirely foolish. He understood the legal definition of receiving stolen funds. He understood the mechanism of wire fraud across state lines. The realization hit him. His wife did not merely lie to their daughter. She orchestrated a felony, stole the money, and used the proceeds to purchase an asset registered in his name. She had dragged him into the center of a federal criminal ring. Thomas slumped backward against the wooden pew. He looked at the back of his wife's head with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. Derek folded inward. He placed his elbows on his knees and lowered his head, burying his face in his hands. The arrogant confidence he displayed in the hallway during the civil hearing was gone. He was no longer the misunderstood victim. He was a documented accomplice facing years in a federal penitentiary. Judge Abernathy leaned forward. Her black robe shifted against the high back of her leather chair. Her demeanor was no longer neutral. It was glacial. She bypassed the prosecutor entirely and fixed her severe gaze directly on the witness. "Mrs. Richardson," the judge said. Her voice cut through the room like a steel blade. Patricia flinched. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. The judge picked up her own copy of the prosecution exhibits. "I am looking at a text message dated October 14th. It was sent from your phone to your son. This date corresponds exactly to the time period when the victim first became aware of the fraudulent accounts." The judge adjusted her reading glasses. "You testified under oath less than 10 minutes ago that you firmly believed your daughter possessed prior knowledge and gave verbal consent for every single one of these loans." "I believed she did," Patricia repeated, her voice trembling. "I swear I thought she knew." "Then explain this document," the judge demanded. The clerk advanced the projector to the final slide. A new chat bubble appeared on the screen. It was highlighted by a thick circle of red ink. The judge read the text aloud. "Make sure Lucinda does not see the mail today. The bank sent a fraud alert." The silence in the courtroom was profound. The heavy oak doors were closed. The air conditioning hummed. The truth hung in the air, undeniable and lethal. Judge Abernathy lowered the paper. She stared down at the witness box. "If you firmly believed your daughter authorized these loans," the judge asked, "why were you instructing your son to intercept her mail and hide the bank notices from her? Why conceal a fraud alert from an account holder who supposedly gave her full permission?" Patricia started to shake. It was not a subtle tremor. Her entire body began to vibrate. Her shoulders heaved. Her hands rattled against the wooden railing. The carefully constructed facade of the elegant, heartbroken matriarch dissolved entirely. She was reduced to a terrified suspect caught in a trap of her own making. She looked at the judge. She looked at the prosecutor. She looked at her husband, who refused to meet her eye. She finally looked at me. I sat in the second row, my hands folded neatly over the cover of my binder. I did not offer a comforting smile. I did not display a flicker of pity. I looked at her with the cold, unyielding gaze of an auditor watching a corrupted ledger finally balance. The equation was perfect. The debt of her betrayal was coming due. I did it to protect my family, Patricia sobbed. Her tears were no longer a theatrical prop. They were born of genuine, primal fear. I was trying to keep everyone together. Judge Abernathy reached for her wooden gavel. You did not protect your family, she snapped. You utilized your daughter as a financial host to subsidize a theft. The judge struck the sounding block. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot. The petition for bail regarding the defendant Derek Richardson is hereby denied, the judge declared. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the county sheriff pending trial. The risk of flight and the documented history of witness tampering make pretrial release impossible. 2 uniformed deputies stepped forward, moving to flank Derek at the defense table. But the judge did not stop there. The gavel rested on the sounding block. Judge Abernathy stood up behind the mahogany bench. She turned her severe gaze away from my brother. She raised her right hand. She pointed her index finger directly at Patricia sitting in the witness box. The judge's extended index finger felt like a physical weight pressing down on the courtroom. The silence was absolute, broken only by the ragged, panicked breathing of my mother in the witness stand. The theatrical sorrow had evaporated entirely. Patricia stared at the judge with wide, unblinking eyes, trapped in the harsh illumination of the overhead lights and the glowing projector screen behind her. Mrs. Richardson, Judge Abernathy stated, her voice resonating with cold, judicial authority. You took an oath before this court to tell the truth. You subsequently delivered sworn testimony that you knew to be entirely false. You fabricated a narrative designed to mislead this proceeding and obstruct justice. I find you in direct criminal contempt of court. Patricia gripped the wooden railing. Her knuckles were white. Your Honor, please, she begged. Her voice was a thin, fragile whisper. I made a mistake. I was confused. The judge ignored the plea. Furthermore, the documentary evidence presented by the prosecution establishes clear, probable cause that you engaged in criminal conspiracy, wire fraud, and the trafficking of stolen identity documents across state lines. The court cannot allow you to leave this building, given your documented propensity to destroy evidence and tamper with witnesses. The judge turned her gaze to the side of the room. Deputy, take the witness into custody. A female sheriff's deputy stepped away from the wall. She walked purposefully across the carpeting. She unclipped a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from her duty belt. The metallic clatter echoed sharply against the wood paneling. The defense attorney jumped to his feet. He threw his hands out, desperate to salvage some semblance of control over the imploding situation. Your Honor, he sputtered, Mrs. Richardson is not a party to this indictment. You cannot detain a character witness without a formal warrant from the district attorney's office. Judge Abernathy struck the sounding block with her gavel. Do not lecture me on procedure in my own courtroom, counselor. I have broad statutory authority to detain individuals for direct contempt and perjury committed in my presence. The prosecutor will draft the formal conspiracy warrants by the end of the day. Until then, she remains in holding. Sit down before I hold you in contempt for interfering with a lawful arrest. The lawyer collapsed into his chair. He closed his legal pad. His role in the drama was officially finished. The female deputy stepped up to the witness box. She placed a firm hand on Patricia's shoulder. Stand up, ma'am, the deputy instructed. Put your hands behind your back. My mother stood slowly. Her legs shook. Her floral blouse, chosen specifically to project an image of modest innocence, now looked absurdly out of place against the harsh reality of the steel cuffs. She brought her hands behind her. The ratchet mechanism of the handcuffs clicked loudly, locking her wrists into position. It was a profound, surreal moment of absolute collapse. The matriarch who had ruled our family with iron control, who had demanded my subservience and extracted my resources to fund her golden son, was now a documented criminal being physically restrained in a court of law. As the deputy guided her out of the witness box, Patricia stopped. She planted her feet against the carpet. She turned her head and looked directly at me, sitting in the second row of the gallery. Her eyes were wide and desperate. She looked at me with an expression I recognized from 1,000 childhood memories. It was the look she gave me when Derek broke a neighbor's window and she needed me to take the blame. It was the look she gave me when Derek overdrew my college bank account and she needed me to absorb the fees. She expected me to stand up. She expected me to rush the railing, to plead with the judge, to sacrifice my own safety, to rescue her from the consequences of her actions. She believed her maternal authority still held power over my programming. I remained seated. I kept my hands folded neatly over the cover of my binder. My face was a mask of cold, calculated indifference. I did not blink. I did not offer a single gesture of comfort. I simply watched the ledger balance. "I do not owe you a rescue," I whispered. The words did not carry across the room, but the message registered in her eyes. The realization hit her with devastating force. The endless well of my required family loyalty had finally run dry. The deputy tugged on her arm. Patricia stumbled forward, her head bowing in defeat, and disappeared through the heavy wooden door leading to the holding cells. Derek watched his mother vanish. The last sliver of his false confidence broke. 2 male deputies hoisted him out of his chair. They secured his wrists behind his back. The tailored navy suit wrinkled as they marched him toward the same holding door. His grand defense strategy of a simple family misunderstanding was dead. It was now a documented, multi-tiered syndicate of familial theft. The courtroom exploded into chaos the moment the holding doors clicked shut. Thomas leaped from his seat in the third row. My father, who had remained silent and rigid throughout the entire proceeding, finally lost his composure. He lunged into the center aisle. He pointed a trembling finger at me. His face was purple with rage. "You destroyed this family," he screamed. His voice cracked with hysteria. "You ruined your brother. You put your own mother in handcuffs. You are a cold-blooded monster." I did not flinch. I slowly stood up. I picked up my heavy binder. I turned to face him. "I did not forge the signatures, Dad," I replied, my voice steady and loud enough to echo in the cavernous room. "I did not text instructions to bypass a bank security flag, and I certainly did not accept a stolen $45,000 wire transfer to buy a motorhome. Your wife destroyed this family. I just provided the documentation." Thomas stepped forward, raising his fists as if to strike me. 2 court bailiffs intercepted him instantly. They grabbed his arms, twisting him backward. They shoved him toward the rear exit of the courtroom. "Get out of the building, sir," one bailiff commanded. "If you threaten a witness again, you will join your wife in a holding cell." Thomas struggled against their grip, but he was no match for the armed officers. They physically escorted him through the heavy double doors, his shouts fading into the distant marble hallway. The gallery emptied quickly. The court clerk gathered her files. The judge retired to her chambers. I stood alone in the quiet room, holding my binder against my chest. The adrenaline faded, leaving behind a sharp, ringing clarity. The war was over. The data had won. Assistant District Attorney Harrison approached me from the prosecution table. He carried his leather briefcase. He stopped a few feet away and offered a respectful, measured nod. "You built an incredible case, Miss Richardson," he said. "I have rarely seen a victim present such an organized, impenetrable timeline." The text messages were the final nail. "The grand jury will hand down indictments for your mother by tomorrow morning." "Thank you, Mr. Harrison," I replied. "I appreciate your willingness to let the evidence speak." Harrison adjusted his glasses. "There is one final detail you should be aware of," he added. His tone shifted, adopting a faint, almost imperceptible note of professional amusement. I listened intently. When your mother admitted under oath that the text messages discussing the recreational vehicle were authentic, she established a documented link between the identity theft and the physical asset, Harrison explained. Missouri law is very clear regarding the proceeds of a felony. Because your parents utilized $45,000 of stolen funds as a down payment, the state considers that vehicle a product of a criminal enterprise. A slow realization dawned on me. The motorhome, the ultimate prize my mother betrayed me to acquire. The district attorney's office is initiating immediate asset forfeiture protocols, Harrison continued. We are seizing the vehicle to hold in trust for restitution to the defrauded banks. Your father is about to lose his new retirement toy. I looked at the prosecutor. The poetic symmetry of the situation was flawless. They traded my future for a luxury asset, and the legal system was about to rip it from their grasp. We tracked the registration data, Harrison said, a faint smile touching the corners of his mouth. We know exactly where the RV is currently parked. He paused, holding his briefcase tightly. Would you like to know what time we are sending the tow trucks to pick it up? The prosecutor handed me a folded slip of paper. It contained an address and a time, 10:30 on Thursday morning. The address belonged to the West County Country Club, an exclusive gated enclave where my mother spent decades cultivating an image of flawless, aristocratic wealth. It was the epicenter of her social power. I did not go to the country club on Thursday. I did not need to witness the event in person. The details of the seizure filtered back to me rapidly through the sprawling network of extended family gossip. The immediate fallout was a masterclass in poetic justice, executing a brutal public correction of the narrative Patricia had so carefully constructed. My mother spent 48 hours in the county holding facility before Thomas managed to secure a bail bondsman. The experience of wearing a bright orange jumpsuit and sleeping on a thin vinyl mattress did not humble her. It triggered a desperate, panicked instinct to double down on her facade. She believed that if she could simply project normalcy, the criminal charges would somehow evaporate into a civil misunderstanding. On Thursday morning, despite facing a pending federal indictment for conspiracy, Patricia proceeded with her scheduled social obligations. She hosted her weekly high society ladies' brunch at the country club. She invited a dozen prominent women from her neighborhood. She arrived early. She drove the brand-new $120,000 luxury motorhome, parking the massive vehicle directly in front of the main clubhouse entrance. She wanted her wealthy peers to marvel at the gleaming chrome and the custom exterior paint. She wanted them to believe her family was thriving, untouched by the rumors of arrests and forged bank documents. At 10:45, while the women sat on the manicured terrace, sipping expensive mimosas and eating imported strawberries, the heavy iron gates of the country club swung open. Two heavy-duty sheriff tow trucks drove slowly up the sweeping, tree-lined driveway. They did not park in the visitor lot. They pulled directly in front of the clubhouse patio, their diesel engines rumbling loudly over the soft classical music playing from the outdoor speakers. 3 uniformed deputies stepped out of the cabs. They carried clipboards and heavy steel chains. According to my Aunt Carol, who texted me a frantic, horrified account of the incident, Patricia stood up so fast she knocked her crystal champagne flute onto the flagstone patio. The glass shattered. The elegant conversation stopped instantly. A senior deputy approached the patio railing. He held up a stamped legal document. He announced in a loud, carrying voice that he was executing a state asset forfeiture warrant. The vehicle in question was officially identified as the product of a criminal wire fraud syndicate. Patricia rushed to the railing. She hissed at the deputies to lower their voices. She threatened to call the club manager. She threatened to sue the county. The deputies ignored her entirely. They hooked the heavy steel chains to the front axle of the motorhome. They operated the hydraulic winch. The massive luxury vehicle was hoisted into the air, its rear tires dragging against the pristine asphalt. The dozen wealthy women sitting at the brunch table watched the spectacle in stunned, paralyzed silence. The gossip network of Chesterfield is ruthless and efficient. Within 2 hours, everyone in her social circle knew Patricia Richardson was not a victim of a mentally unstable daughter. She was a documented felon whose assets were seized by the state to pay back stolen bank funds. Her meticulously curated reputation, the social standing she valued above her own children, was permanently annihilated. She was exiled from the very community she betrayed, me, to impress. The legal dominoes fell in rapid succession over the following months. Derek sat in a concrete cell, unable to secure bail. His defense attorney reviewed the mountain of digital evidence. The iCloud chat logs provided by my mother were an insurmountable hurdle. Derek had no phantom business partner. He had no verbal family agreement. He possessed only a paper trail of forged signatures and stolen routing numbers. Facing a potential sentence of 20 years if the case went to trial, my brother collapsed. He accepted a comprehensive plea agreement offered by the federal prosecutor. Derek pleaded guilty to 5 counts of felony bank fraud and 2 counts of aggravated identity theft. The judge sentenced him to 5 years in a federal penitentiary, followed by 3 years of supervised release and mandatory financial restitution. His girlfriend, Jessica Vance, lost her notary commission and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of record tampering, receiving a suspended sentence and probation. Patricia faced her own severe reckoning. The state prosecutor leveraged the threat of a prison sentence to secure her cooperation. Desperate to avoid returning to a cell, my mother pleaded guilty to a single felony count of criminal conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The judge cited her age and lack of prior criminal history as mitigating factors. She avoided prison, receiving 3 years of heavily supervised probation. The terms of her probation were strict. She was required to surrender her passport, submit to random financial audits, and perform 500 hours of community service. The seized motorhome was auctioned by the state, the proceeds distributed proportionally to the defrauded lenders. While my family navigated the crushing weight of the justice system, I utilized their convictions to reconstruct my own life. I took certified copies of Derek's plea agreement and Patricia's conspiracy conviction. I mailed the heavy packets to every major credit reporting bureau and every defrauded financial institution. The law is explicit regarding documented identity theft. The lenders possessed no legal standing to hold me accountable for the debts. Over the course of 6 weeks, the negative marks began to vanish from my credit profile. The $45,000 SBA loan disappeared. The 14 maxed-out credit cards were wiped clean. The fraudulent second mortgage on my condominium was formally expunged from the county property records. My credit score rebounded, climbing back to an immaculate number. The heavy brass-barreled red pen had finally balanced the ledger. The missing numbers were accounted for, and the lies were struck from the record. I returned to my corporate office downtown. I sat in a conference room with Marcus, the HR director, and Helen, my department supervisor. I placed the final updated credit report on the oak table. Marcus reviewed the spotless document. He looked up, his expression a mixture of profound respect and professional relief. You navigated an incredibly volatile crisis with absolute precision, Lucinda, he said. The hospital network requires auditors who can maintain objective clarity under extreme pressure. You proved your integrity is unshakable. Helen slid a new folder across the table. It was not a suspension notice. It was a formal offer letter. The executive board had approved a massive promotion. I was no longer a senior auditor. I was officially appointed as the Director of Corporate Compliance for the entire regional hospital network. The salary increase was substantial. The new position granted me an office on the executive floor with a panoramic view of the St. Louis skyline. I signed the contract using my red pen. 6 months after the initial credit alert pinged my phone, the dust finally settled. The chaotic noise of my toxic family was replaced by a profound, secure silence. I decided to solidify my new baseline. I listed my downtown condominium for sale. It sold in 4 days above the asking price. I purchased a beautiful, quiet townhome in a gated community in a different county. I did not provide my new address to a single relative. On a Saturday afternoon, I stood in the living room of my old condo, surrounded by cardboard moving boxes. I taped the final box shut. I picked up a black marker to label the cardboard. My cell phone rang, breaking the quiet of the empty room. I pulled the device from my pocket. The caller ID displayed a number I had not seen in months. It was Thomas, my father. I stared at the screen. The man who stood by silently while my mother unlocked my door. The man who screamed at me in a courtroom hallway, blaming me for exposing his wife's crimes. I did not block the call. I wanted to hear the sound of his defeat. I pressed the green button and lifted the phone to my ear. The ultimate payoff had finally arrived. I pressed the green icon on the glass screen. I lifted the phone to my ear. I did not offer a greeting. I let the silence stretch across the cellular connection. The empty walls of my living room amplified the quiet. On the other end of the line, a ragged, wet intake of air broke the static. My father was weeping. The man who had stood in a mahogany courtroom and pointed a trembling finger at me, shouting that I had ruined his life, was now reduced to a series of broken, guttural sobs. I listened to the sound. I felt no pity. I felt no urge to comfort him. I analyzed his tears the way I analyze a spreadsheet anomaly. They were the result of a miscalculated risk. "Lucinda," he whispered. His voice cracked on the second syllable. He paused to blow his nose. The arrogant bluster was gone. He sounded old. He sounded defeated. He launched into a frantic inventory of his ruin. The state seized the recreational vehicle, leaving them with a taxable penalty. The defense attorney representing Patricia demanded a final retainer payment to close out her probation paperwork. Their joint checking accounts remained frozen, pending a final audit by the federal investigators. His pension barely covered the property taxes on the Chesterfield house, which they were now forced to list for sale. He laid his financial devastation at my feet, expecting me to pick up the pieces. "I need $10,000, Thomas said. His breathing grew shallow. "Just 10,000, Lucinda. It is a loan. I swear on my life I will pay you back. We are drowning. Your mother cannot sleep. We have nothing left." I remained silent, letting him hear his own desperation echo in the void. When silence failed to produce a rescue, he reverted to the only strategy he knew: guilt. "You won," he pleaded. "You proved your point. Derek is in a cell. Your mother is a convicted felon. We lost our friends. We lost our standing. Is that not enough punishment for you? Be the bigger person, Lucinda. We are still your parents. Blood is blood. We made a terrible mistake, but you have the resources to fix this. You just got a promotion. You have the money. Please forgive us and help your family." I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked out over the sprawling grid of the city. The afternoon sun cast long, sharp shadows across the concrete. I thought about the forged signature. I thought about the bank appraiser walking through my private sanctuary. I thought about my mother sitting on a witness stand, manufacturing a story of my mental instability to save herself. I took a deep, steady breath. "I would love to help you, Dad," I replied. My voice was a calm, even current, devoid of anger or empathy. But according to Mom's sworn testimony in a court of law, I am just a bitter, broke, unstable woman. I maxed out my credit cards in a manic spending spree. I have nothing left to give. Thomas gasped. He tried to speak, to scramble backward, to unweave the web of lies they had spun to trap me. "Lucinda, wait! We did not mean it like that." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I tapped the red icon. The call disconnected. I opened the settings menu on his contact profile. I selected the block feature. A warning prompt appeared on the screen, asking if I wanted to prevent this caller from ever reaching me again. I pressed confirm. I deleted his contact file. I deleted Patricia's file. I erased Derek's number. I severed the digital ties, burning the final bridge connecting me to the Richardson family. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I picked up the roll of packing tape, sealed the last cardboard box, and walked out of the condominium. Moving day proceeded with efficient precision. Professional movers transported my belongings to the new townhome situated in a quiet, gated enclave on the edge of the county. The new property featured thick oak doors, a secure entry system, and large windows that faced a dense line of evergreen trees. It was a fortress of my own making. By Sunday evening, the boxes were unpacked. The furniture sat in its proper place. I stood in my new home office. The walls were painted a crisp, clean white. A solid mahogany desk occupied the center of the room. Against the far wall stood a tall, custom-built bookshelf. I walked over to the lowest moving box. I opened the cardboard flaps. I pulled out the thick, 3-inch binder. The metal rings clicked softly as I handled it. The clear plastic sleeves held the printed credit reports, the cell tower location data, and the highlighted iCloud chat logs. The edges of the pages bore the faded red ink of my brass-barreled pen. I did not hide the binder in a locked filing cabinet. I did not toss it into a dark closet to collect dust. I lifted the heavy folder and placed it on the highest shelf, right in the center, where it stood upright and visible. It was not a painful memory. It was a trophy. It was a bound, documented record of my survival. It represented the exact moment I stopped paying for the mistakes of others and started auditing my own worth. I am sharing this ledger with you today because society sells a very dangerous narrative about family. We are conditioned to believe that shared DNA is a sacred bond, an unbreakable contract requiring infinite sacrifice. We are told that forgiveness is an obligation. We are told to keep the peace, to absorb the damage, and to protect the hierarchy, regardless of the cost. But shared history is not a license for financial abuse. Forgiveness is a choice, and it requires the offender to offer genuine accountability. When the people assigned to protect you decide to harvest your stability instead, they break the contract. You do not owe them a rescue. You do not owe them your silence. Sometimes, the most profound act of self-respect is simply stepping aside and letting a toxic family experience the full, unshielded weight of their own consequences. Accountability is not an act of revenge. It is the natural result of bad data. My brother stole my identity. My parents tried to steal my truth. But you cannot steal data. If this story empowered you to check your credit, lock down your financial borders, and set your own boundaries, drop a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on toxic family loyalty. Subscribe to Revenge Order, and I will see you in the next one.